Welcome to episode 176 of the Women of the Military podcast. This week, my guest is Melissa Washington. Melissa was one of the panelists in episode 173, where we highlighted the importance of sharing the stories of women. So I wanted to have her on as a guest for her story in the military, and so that's what this episode is about. She served in the Navy, and when she was in the Navy, she met her husband, who was a Marine, and they were able to stay connected even though they were stationed in different places and deployed, and they eventually got married when she left the Navy, and she was a military spouse. But she was looking for a community, and she started meeting with about 20 women veterans in Sacramento, which has now turned into Women Veteran Alliance, which is an organization to connect women veterans, and they have resources to help women veterans, conferences, a magazine, and much, much more. And so we talked about her experience in the Navy and what she's doing today to help women veterans. Women of the Military podcast would like to thank Sabio Coding Bootcamp for sponsoring this week's episode. Sabio Coding Bootcamp is a top-ranked coding bootcamp that is 100% dedicated to helping smart and highly motivated individuals become exceptional software engineers. Visit their website at www.sabio.la to learn how you may be able to use your GI Bill of benefits to train at Sabio. Your tuition and monthly BAH stipend may be paid during your training period. They are also 100% committed in helping you find your first job in tech. So don't forget to head over to www.sabio.la to learn more. Welcome to the show, Melissa. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks, Amanda. Happy to be here.
So I always like to start with, why did you decide to join the military?
Couple reasons. One, to serve our country, but also to, just to get away. I was during that time I was in community college. I was going to be a school teacher. That's what I was going to school for. And nobody believed me. Not even my parents. Nobody believed me that I joined the military. I guess I wasn't that military quote type of person. But you know what? There was a reason I joined. There was a reason I joined the Navy, because had I not joined the Navy, then I wouldn't have met my husband, and then I wouldn't be here today. So it's where I was supposed to be.
So you were going to school to be a teacher, and was it kind of like I saw a sign, or you got a flyer, or you just had this crazy idea? Do you remember what drew you to the Navy?
Because a lot of my ideas are crazy, but they end up turning out good. So that, and I'm a risk taker, right? I mean, that's a big jump to take. Well, one of the main reasons it was the Navy, because, when you go to the recruiting offices are next to each other, right? So they're the Marines, they had that bar and they want you to do a pull-up, and that ain't for me, because I can't, no matter how much training you give me in that bar is just not going to do it. Of course, the other ones, they want to get you in there. And then, the Navy, they had their sales spiel until it was funny because it's until the recruiter, he says, "Oh, I never put a girl in the Navy before," and I was like, "Oh, okay." But, here I'm 19, okay. He was more nervous than I was.
That's funny.
Well, and they got it all wrong. I mean, even none of the guys in the office had recruited a girl, quote, They didn't know what I should bring to boot camp, which I don't know why they didn't have a list. So most of the stuff I brought, because they told me to bring, I had to ship it back because we got issued all that stuff. So here I'm sending a box of stuff back that I didn't even need to take. And I also cut my hair before I went, because I was hearing from others, "Oh, you should cut your hair because they're going to chop it up." And so I ended up chopping it off myself. So
yeah, it would have been helpful if you had my new book that's coming out in September, The Girl's Guide to Military Service.
Absolutely. That would have been fantastic. Yes, actually, that should be the all military recruiters' best resource there, to hand out any girl that they recruit. And I say girl sarcastically.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea behind the book, is that the young women or girls can walk into the recruiting station and the recruiter can be like, "Here you go. This will answer all your questions," and then come back, and if you have more specific questions, then I can help you. But it's to get all their questions answered, and all the questions that I wish I would have known when I was joining the military.
Yeah, right. You don't. You just take what they know, or take what, you believe because they should know what they're talking about, right? So, taking me to the ASVAB and doing this and telling me, okay, this is your day you're going to go, and these are all the choices you're going to have when you get out of your school and all that stuff. And by the way, you're going to Orlando, Florida in September when it's so humid out there. Yeah.
I don't think they have Orlando anymore, but it's Orlando and Chicago.
Yeah, so I was probably one of the last companies there, one of the last few before they closed Orlando, the recruit training center there in Florida. But I think I'd rather have gone there than to be in the snow in Chicago because I'm not much of a snow person, so I just dealt with the heat. But the heat was great because I lost a lot of weight, got sunburned, and the whole thing.
So were there any challenges that you faced while you were at boot camp besides not being quite prepared?
I mean, I think just a lot of challenges that we all have, right? Just like figure out why in the heck did I do this, right? And getting comfortable taking a shower with a bunch of other women or, using the toilet with no door on it. I mean, just those little things, right? You just do it. Just all the, additional physical aspects, the training piece, the food that sucks, the gas chamber, just those kind of things. But then also too, meeting, women I'm from California. So meeting women from all over the US, just their differences. And I don't say it was a challenge. Well, I made sure I went to church every Sunday because I volunteered. So I was there. I was like, let me go there. And that's also too where you got some cookies and juice. So, yeah. And I remember when it was like an older lady, she was in the military. She just like, they volunteered at the church. And she said, I just don't understand why they treat you girls so mean. It's like, oh, but we're here. But one of the other interesting things, and I don't know if they still do this, it's, they taught you how to brush your teeth. And I just, in some ways it's good. In some ways it's kind of sad to think that people come from where they don't know how to have, proper hygiene or things like that. But they literally like, okay, your toothbrush and so some ways it's good. And I mean, hopefully they are doing that because having proper hygiene it's very important to have that. But one of the things I will say, so my maiden name is Davis. So, and now my married name is Washington. So I'm glad I had the Davis because having to stencil Washington, I'd be in there for a long time stenciling my dungarees and my blouse and everything else with that long name. So that was a good thing.
I'm working on a series for the summer to help women as they join the military tied with the book launch. And she said that the Navy just brought back a 2-week life skills course because they found that a bunch of their recruits didn't know things about finances and like basic stuff like brushing your teeth and dental care and all these things. And some people were like, 2 weeks is kind of overkill, but it sounds like they have to cover everything because everyone doesn't come in at the same level.
Absolutely. And it's important, right? I mean, we're, the military, we're bringing everybody from all over the U.S. and our experiences are different. Our life experience is different, where we come from. And I think it's so important. But that was my first taste of, call it sexual harassment there. And again, when you're 19, you was like, yeah, whatever kind of thing. So my company commander, we're out there running and they don't give you the best bras either, of course. So, and I need a good bra that's not going to bounce. So we're running and he turns around and he says, Davis, you better put some duct tape on there. You're going to give yourself a black eye. So it's like, ha, ha, ha. But then in some sense, it's harassment, right? Because he's there commenting on my boobs that are bouncing up and down and they're going to hit me in my face. So yeah, that was one thing I'll never forget that day, that happening. So.
Yeah, for him, it was just a joke and like something that he said, and you still remember it years later.
I would say I'm bothered by it. I mean, it's kind of, he probably definitely couldn't say that nowadays because, this was 30 years ago. And back then, they were able to say a lot more nastier things to us than I'm sure they can say to men and women today.
Yeah, but I'm sure he doesn't even remember saying that.
Probably not, because I think, he of course he was an older guy, so it's just probably that was just his way of communicating and talking, and maybe he shouldn't have been a commander of women in boot camp, I don't know.
Yeah. So it sounds like boot camp kind of opened your eyes to a world that you hadn't really seen before. Not only challenging in like the physical sense and being away from California, but also like the sexual harassment and being around so many men. Do you think that would be true?
Yeah. And then, so we didn't have at that time, it wasn't a combined, the guys had their own area. We had our own area. So the only like exposure we had to guys was like walking around or your company commander. So there wasn't a lot of exposure that way. But I think a lot of it was just more of, the other women and their experiences. You know, again, coming from California, we're a very diverse world. And I remember this one girl from Louisiana, and she says, and then we had a Filipino woman in there, and she's like, she'd never seen a Filipino before. I mean, she had never seen that really a person, an Asian. But it's just, right, it's just as we bring all these people together, we're introducing people to different cultures and different ethnicities. And I think that's one of the great things about being in the military is our ways that we can truly work with others that come from different backgrounds.
It is. It's a difference of like culture and experience, and it just changes your worldview. I think the more that you get to know more people and see more of the country and the world.
Absolutely.
So what was your career field when you were in the Navy?
So my job that, after I took the ASVAB, and then they give you like your list of your opportunities. And one of them that I was not interested in was being an electrician. I'm like, I don't even know how I even qualified for that piece. There's a couple other ones, but the other one was like, the other one that I chose was a storekeeper, which was supply. I'm like, well, I can do that. I can purchase things. And so that's what I did. So my A school that I went to right after boot camp was in Meridian, Mississippi. And that was another culture shock for myself. And so I went there to learn how to be a storekeeper. And that's actually also where I met my husband too.
Was he going to training or was he at the base?
So he was there. He had already been in the Marine Corps for 4 years, but they had closed his MOS because he was in the Gulf War and they closed that MOS. So he was going to a new school. So he was already E4 and he wasn't supposed to fraternize with the rest of us there. So we had the Marines and the Navy there at the Naval Air, which is also the Naval Air Station Meridian. But on the other side was the school. And that's where, well, he'd have to tell the story because he tells it better than I do. Because we were playing volleyball and he hit me with the volleyball, and that's where it went from there. So again, having not gone in the Navy, having not joined that, so it was just all those things, right? That's where we were destined to be. But then going back to the whole culture thing, which I always like to share, it's just because my husband's Black, I'm white, and people there in Meridian, Mississippi, a lot of them didn't like that. And actually, the base was even closing down. Because there was a KKK rally. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what kind of, that's very scary for people. And, it's probably something maybe a little bit normal for them. But another story, which I always like to share just to really paint a picture of, so by this time it's November, December 1991. And we were going to go to the movies off of base. And we were going to see The Last Boy Scout, which is the movie. So him and I are standing in line, and everybody looked at us. I kid you not. Black people, white people, they were all looking at us. And they kind of just like didn't stand by us. So we go in, and it's a popular movie, so people are, there. And we go and we sit down. And nobody sits in front of us. Nobody sits behind us. And nobody sits to the left or right of us. It's just us there. How can you just paint not to say a better picture, but a picture of truly what it was like to be there at that time? And hopefully it's changed some, but just to feel that there, just based upon somebody's, the color of their skin, they weren't going to sit by us because they didn't like it.
And is he from California too, or? He's
from Dallas, Texas. And for him too, it was a shock to experience, but then it's just part of who we are now. It's just something we know, and that happened, and just hopefully that still doesn't go on there today.
Yeah, the 90s though isn't like that long ago. It's not like it was the 60s,
right? I'm just like, wow, that was our first date, kind of the start of our now 27-year marriage, but that's where it all began.
And then I'm guessing you guys got stationed at different places because he was in the Marines and you were in the Navy. How did you stay connected?
So he went to, which was El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, which is in Orange County, which is no longer there anymore. So that's where he went. And then I went to the way other side of the country, to Little Creek, Virginia, on board a rescue salvage ship. So that was my first duty station. So now remember, there was no Google, there was no like cell phones, there is nothing, it was just the good old fashioned pick up the phone and dial the number and hope you know the number kind of thing. So that's in letters. That's writing letters and calling each other on the phone. That's pretty much what we did. And it would have to be something like after work, because I really couldn't call them, in my office there on the ship. That's pretty much how we stayed connected that entire time that I was there. And then I went on a 6-month Mediterranean, deployment to there. So being gone again, writing the letters and sending cards.
It's crazy how technology has changed so much, because I knew your answer was going to be like, oh, we just FaceTime. Because my husband commissioned a year before me, and it was in 2007. And even though there was internet, there wasn't really Skype or FaceTime or anything like that. So we just did phone calls back and forth, and that was how we stayed connected.
I mean, that's just the only way you could stay connected. I mean, even when he went to deploy too, there was still, we would have to write the letters and then put the numbers on them so you knew which one to read in which order.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your job and what you were doing.
They called it a storekeeper. Now it is a logistics specialist. So I guess it sounds better now. Going on a smaller ship, because my ship, there was maybe about 100 or so of us, primarily divers, because that was the function of the ship, was to salvage things that crashed into the water. So I'm glad that I went to a smaller ship, because then I got to learn everything. This is pretty much just me, the chief, and then the supply officer. So, ordering the different parts for the ship, doing the inventory, anything that was needed for the ship. And then, of course, when the fiscal year came, to be close to the end, you'd have to spend it or lose it. So then everybody became my best friend, because everybody wanted, they wanted the boots and just anything else, the Leathermen, we can get them. So that's what I did. And it was, like I said, it was a really good experience having been on there and having that experience, because I got more attention in some ways too. And I came in as an E2 because I had the college credits, so that helped, and it helped me get to E3 quicker and then E4 quicker as well. And then going on the 6 month to the Mediterranean, went to France and Italy and Spain and Greece and Bulgaria. But what was really cool about the ship is that it was small enough. When we went to Italy, we pulled into the Venice Canal. That was, talk about a very cool experience having that. And, we pull in, and we're there for a couple of days, and we pull in, and a German ship is right there. So the Germans, they were fascinated, because here there's women, on the ship. So, they want to invite us all over to their ship, and they had a bar on their ship, so it's just these cultural differences. Having that experience was pretty cool, just being able to spend the time in there. And then, coming back, but, I'm a West Coast girl. The East Coast is just very different military on the East Coast and the West Coast. Not to say, we're more flip-flops out here than other things. I'm like, okay. And I kind of had that guy out on the West Coast I wanted to get to. So I'm like, I got to find a way to get out of here. So if there's a will, there's a way. Melissa will find it, even that there was resistance. So somebody had told me there's this thing called a swap. So what you have to do is you have to find a person that is equal rank, has pretty much the same time as you, and preferably a woman, because there were only certain ships that we were allowed on. At that time, we weren't allowed on the aircraft carriers, and we weren't allowed to be on combat ships. So I was like, okay, so I had to find another woman who was on another ship in San Diego. Now, granted, again, going back, there was no Google, there was no searches. It was the good old telephone and writing. So I had to call people. My chief was helpful, finding people on the West Coast to find someone and this and that. And so found her, and she came out, and then I got to go, and my mom drove out to Virginia, and we drove my car cross country to San Diego. And from there, I went on to the USS Acadia, which was a destroyer tender at 32nd Street in San Diego. The destroyer tenders are all decommed now. But so with the destroyer tender, the primary focus is to tend the destroyers. So on the destroyer tenders, you have the regular ship functions. So you have your whole engineering department, your electronics people, and then you have a whole other group, the same thing, but they're there to tend the other ships. So if a destroyer needed parts, or they needed something fixed or repaired, they would come to our ship and we would make those repairs. So now I'm going from this little ship to this big ship. So now my job is a lot less. I'm doing more of a focused job. And then, of course, when you get there, and, I was at E4 at that time, they put you in the storeroom, and you start in the big storeroom. But then you get to, learn to drive a forklift. And, there's all these other little things you learn. And then you get to, okay, now I'm working in the office now doing open contracts. So if there's like items that weren't available in a Navy stock system, that was part of my job to do that. So not long ago after I got on board, we were getting ready to do a 6-month deployment. So it's 1993. And they're like, okay, we're going on our Westpac. Unfortunately, the ship had probably a not so great name as the Love Boat, because the ship not that long ago was in the Gulf War, and a lot of women came back pregnant. So, you got men and women on a ship, and things do happen there. So we did our 6-month deployment. We started, of course, you start in Hawaii, not a bad spot to pull into. And that was probably one of the most, historical, but emotional experience to man the rails when you're pulling to Pearl Harbor. Just right now, it just gives me goosebumps. It gives me goosebumps when you go to visit it, but to pull in on a naval vessel into Pearl Harbor and you're there manning the rails, and you're honoring, everything that took place there. So that was a very cool experience. And, from there, you have your schedule of where you're going to go. And of course, sometimes it always doesn't happen the way you would like it to happen. This was when Somalia, things were hot and heavy over in Somalia. Stuff was happening over there. And so with the other ships I were out with, again, our focus is to help those destroyers. So I spent Christmas of 1993 stationed off the coast of Somalia because we were tending all the destroyers that were supporting all of the Marines and all the others that were there. And of course, all of those guys wanted to find ways to get to our ship because, again, we're the only ship with the women on it, kind of thing. But before that, so my birthday's in November. So I turned 21, but I turned 21 in Bali. We just happened to be in Bali when I turned 21. And I was like, hey, that's a pretty cool experience. But the whole, going to Somalia, and it's hot there. So when it's winter here, it's the opposite there. So it was freaking hot out there, hot and muggy, and we leave there and then we go to Hong Kong, spend some time over in the Persian Gulf, in Japan. The other thing that the Navy does, and I hope that I'm sure that now they could do it online, but what they do is they would fly out college professors out there. So I was able to take college courses on the ship. So, any opportunity, you weren't forced to take it, but as opportunity, I'm like, I'll take some classes because then that just adds, to that. So I would, take classes on board the ship. So going back to who's now my husband, he's one of those guys that grew up wanting to be in the military, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to be a Marine and I'm going to spend my whole life in the Marine Corps. So I'm like, okay. And, as I saw other people with that whole, being in the military and there's such, some people it didn't work for them. And I'm like, I don't even know if I really want to stay, and I'll be deployed. And he's deployable. And so now it's 1994. And at that time, President Clinton was downsizing the military. He was in a whole reduction in force. So I raised my hand. I said, I want out. Again, got resistance like, oh, you should stay in. We want you to do this, that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nope. They're trying to like sell you on it. But the thing in this time, there used to be this is not a chip, but an example. I know people can't see it that are listening, but you have to envision that it was this duplicate rectangle piece of paper, and it was called a chip, and you have to fill it out. And then at the bottom are all the signatures. So it's like this duplicate thing. So I have to submit this like all the way up the chain of command. So you have to get like, I don't remember, like 5 to 7 signatures of people. Could there be a chance it gets lost somewhere? Absolutely. At least I'm sure now everything's done online. You just, click it and goes to the next person. So it took me a while to get this go up the chain. And I'm sure those that didn't want me to go, they probably stayed a little longer on their desk. And during that time too, we had so I was E4 and they wanted me to sit for the E5, but E5 I would have been awarded in September, that's when I would have gotten out. So I'm like, I'm not going to sit for it because I don't want you guys to say, oh, you're E5 now, you need to stay in. Like, I'm not playing that. So I'm like, I don't want to take it. So I didn't get in trouble, but it wasn't highly favored that I didn't do that. So I got out. But the real cool thing is, so I did the 3 years, and of course, they still got you on the hook, right, for the rest of the time. So I'm like, that's fine. I'm done because I'm going to marry this Marine and I'm going to be the Marine Corps wife and that kind of thing. So this couldn't have been planned better, I tell you. So it's August, and our ship out of San Diego needed to come up to Alameda to do some repairs or whatever, because she was going to be decom not that long after. And I'm from the Bay Area. Literally the ship brought me home. It pulled in under the Golden Gate, pulled into Alameda, and I walked off the ship, and my home area, with all my stuff. And I got out of the Navy in September, which was great because I was planning our wedding. I planned it like in a month because literally I walked off September. We got married October and he deployed November for his 6-month deployment. And that's how my marriage started and how my active duty career stopped. And then now I'm the Marine Corps wife, and that's where all that began.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. And I think it's so interesting to talk about the history of the military between like the 90s and the 2000s, because I grew up then and I didn't even know the military had anything going on. I was like blissfully unaware of like all the stuff going on. And I've learned a lot in doing these interviews. And so it's interesting to hear like you were in the Navy for 3 years in what is the peacetime, but you deployed multiple times and had different experiences, and your husband deployed, and you guys had to spend time apart, obviously, because you're different branches. And it's just really interesting to hear your story because I didn't really know any of it. I just know what you're doing today. I think it's really important that we talk about these stories, which goes back to our panel that we just did about how important it is to document this history and to talk about what happened, because so many people don't know about anything that women did in the military from the Gulf War. They don't even know present day stuff, but there really is just kind of this like lost history of what happened in between.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important, especially, as we look at, because when I was getting out in 94, they were starting to outfit the aircraft carriers for women. Because again, we still weren't allowed yet, but that process was starting. And I'm sure how much, that's a huge change. But we were on ships because a lot of people like, women have been on ships for a long time. There's just certain ones that they let us on. But it was interesting, though, because, you can't be on a combat ship, but you can be in a combat zone. I mean, we're at the coast of Somalia, but we're not a combatant ship, but we've got everybody else there. So it's interesting. But and a lot of things that I did, it's, and I tell people it's all what I made of it, right? I could have just... I go with the flow and just do, but I'm like, I want to do other things. I want to get out of here. So I'm going to find a way I can go and be somewhere else. Don't say, well, this doesn't, it's not going to happen. Because trust me, like I said, people are like, oh, this is not going to happen. They discourage me. I'm like, well, and I'm going to get out, or I'm going to take college classes. I'm going to do, what I need to do or feel like I do. And could I have stayed in? Probably. I was a good sailor. It's hard sometimes for me to follow direction, which I may feel there's a better way to go. And, it's like, okay, we have to go this way, or this is the way we do things. Like, okay. So my first job, I'm going to show you my first job because this is the transferable skills story. Back then, in 1994, you faxed a resume, right? You saw the job. And so I saw the job in the newspaper and faxed my resume. And so I got out that Friday and I started the job Monday. So I didn't have any time. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to start this job. Because again, I was already in Alameda, so I was able to interview because my ship was there and where I'm from. So I applied for this job. It was initially as an office manager. Okay, I could do this. And it was for a floor cleaning company. And the only reason that I got the job, whoever else had interviewed, is because I knew how to operate a floor buffer. Because in the Navy, we stripped and waxed the deck. So I knew how to strip and wax a deck. And that's why I got the job, because I could strip and wax a deck. I knew all about the equipment and the cleaning and how to do that. So that's my transferable skills from the Navy that helped me get my first job. So they were fascinated that a woman can operate a floor buffer.
So you were already qualified in the job because it was really good related to what you were doing already, but then you had that additional skill of using a floor buffer for the Navy.
Absolutely. And then having those, because we had the warehouse where we had the pallets, the products. I knew how to get on the forklift if we needed to, but that was just part of doing it. And then I ended up being in sales, and so that just the opportunity grew. And also, too, because I was in the military, I was able to check that box for the diversity as the company was trying to get new clients. It's like, oh, well, here we have, we have a woman who is in the military. So I remember, and you'll know exactly where this is. So by that time, we had moved to Southern California. They were trying to get the Los Angeles Air Force Base as a contract. So the janitors, of course, come in at night. That's when they clean. And so I went to Los Angeles Air Force Base with the equipment, with the cleaning products at night to show their lead person and the guys working there how to use the machine. And it was a trip because I pull in and I got the stuff, and I'd been talking to the lead guy already, and then the other guys, they're speaking Spanish, and I know a little bit of Spanish, and they're like waiting like for the boss to come in, like my boss to come in to show them how to use it. So I'm like, no, I am the boss. So like they're looking for Jefe. I'm like, no, I'm going to show you. So it's just kind of this thing. It was funny because, so I'm doing that. But that was a very interesting experience being part of that and understand, so I'm, only in my my 20s and understanding the whole sales process, commission, how all this business stuff works, how you do these things. And one of the other accounts was, and I always like to tell people, I spent a whole day in Folsom prison because they were trying to get Folsom, the prison industry, as an account. So they send me and a couple other people who fit the diversity blocks. And we got a behind the scenes tour there at Folsom. That was, it wasn't like the regular guided tour. We got like the behind the scenes stuff. And trust me, I didn't eat that day. They did offer us lunch. I'm like, no, thank you. Yes, so I got to see where they made the license plates, the whole thing. But that's kind of like my experience working there. There's a lot of other things. Well, good lessons learned. All these are stepping stones that lead me to do what I'm able to do today. I mean, all those different experiences have some type of effect, whether good or bad, on what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing today, because you just had a book that you...
Collaboration, a contributor of 21 other authors.
And you're also running Women Veteran Alliance and Women Veteran Giving, and you have a bunch of other stuff going on. I know that it originally started with 20 women going out to dinner, and now look where it is now, which reminds me of my blog started with me writing 5 minutes once a week, and now I have a podcast.
Absolutely, because we all start somewhere, and that's, and you may not have, you didn't know me then, and I didn't know you then, but we see where you're at. And I think that's always important to tell people. It's like we all started somewhere. I mean, I just didn't end up in this chapter. I was, a few chapters before is where it started. And you can start with whether it's the intent or not the intent of what it's going to be today. I mean, I'm sure you probably didn't think this was going to be what it was when you were doing it. And I didn't feel this was what it's going to be. And that's what I wanted to do, having come from, I'd worked in corporate America. Granted, I've owned my own business. I was laid off. I mean, I just had all these different experiences. But one of the things, living here in the Sacramento area is like, I'm looking for the opportunity to connect with other women veterans. I connected in some of the veteran space prior to that. And one of my things that I did before I started was I'd actually worked at LinkedIn for 4 years. I was their global corporate meeting planning for them and went around the world with them. But then one of the other things before I even started there, I was doing LinkedIn training. I was teaching LinkedIn classes, and I had another book I wrote about, which has LinkedIn, talking about how to use LinkedIn as well. That I live near Beale Air Force Base, and for the last 10 at least years, I go up every quarter and I do a LinkedIn class for service members that are transitioning in their spouses. So this is outside of the TAP because theirs is very basic. Mine is like good stuff. If not, they probably wouldn't have me come back. So that was my still connection to the military and staying connected with the military. And actually next Tuesday, I'll be going up there to teach the class. The other piece was missing. It's like, okay, I know there's got to be other women. And I knew a handful of women. And that's when I got them together. And I just, kid you not, I just thought this was going to be every third Thursday of every month. I'll find a restaurant we'll go to and I'll find a speaker. That's how it started. Then it was like full speed. I mean, I didn't know the need. And then I saw the need. I'm like, oh my gosh, there is such a need for women to be connected. And I remember one of the ladies coming, it was probably like our third or fourth meeting. And she says, I thought I was the only woman veteran in Sacramento. I mean, she was serious. I mean, she really felt like that. I'm like, if she feels like this, and here she is retired, and if she feels like that, just saying how many other women feel that isolation or feel like they're the only one, or they're not, or women who are not connected to their benefits, or women who don't consider themselves veterans. I mean, all this stuff was just happening. I'm like, oh my. So again, using, a lot of my experience and other things and people, that's helped me propel it. Because I could have stopped, or I could have just said, you know what, I'm not going to create a website. I'm not going to create a name. I'm not going to get it trademarked, all this stuff, right, you have to do. But I just continued to do it. And by that time, once I'm like 6-7 months in, I'm like, I'm already in the deep end. I mean, I didn't even test the water. I'm already out here, and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do what I need to do to to continue this. And here we are, 7 years later, and everything else that's happened between then.
Yeah, I really love it. And I got to go to the Unconference in October, and you were like, it's not really a conference. And I was like, how is it not really a conference? There's speakers. And then I went and I was like, oh, it's not really a conference. It's just like a big party. And it was so much fun to be with other women veterans and just to be able to hear their stories and connect with them. And you think I'd get enough of that with my podcast, but I guess I just love being around women veterans. And so it was so much fun to be there and to just celebrate everything that we are doing. And so I really love the mission and the purpose behind Women Veteran Alliance. And
that's what I want. That's what I like. When I look at things, I don't want to create something that's already there, right? I'd rather let's collaborate with others. But if I can find ways to fill a gap and to bring something like the Unconference, because like I said, it's not your typical conference. Why does it have to be a boring conference? And so, granted, not all conferences are, and I honestly feel now, especially with COVID, a lot of these conferences are going to go that route where they're going to have that wellness piece. I mean, we had, childcare forever at our conference. That was at the first time we did it. And that was a complaint women had. They said, I can't come because I don't have childcare. I'm like, let's make that happen the next one. And again, that should be something that's for all conferences. They should have, if you want to get more women, because even if it's not just being a single mom, it could be a woman that has a partner or spouse that may need the childcare. So let's, stop these barriers from women from coming. And that just goes back to my experience at LinkedIn. I did all these corporate, I did all these planning for events, and I speak at events. So it's like that. So what I did is I took a little bit of everything that I've experienced, and then I put it all into the Unconference. And the only thing is with the Unconference is, granted, when I worked at LinkedIn, I'd have like $1 million budget or whatever. Now I have to go out and I have to find the money to be able to cover the cost for the conference. So that was like my first lesson learned. And I do share that in the book, which I know we'll talk about. So in the book, I pretty much talk about the beginning of starting Women Veterans Alliance to pretty much current. And I share some lessons learned in there. And that first one was the Unconference that I did is I didn't charge enough, because I truly believe that we were going to have companies wanting to sponsor, just like, I just thought people are saying, oh, yeah, we want to be a sponsor. Here's $5,000. Yeah, that didn't happen. But we've gotten better. And I just, I have to understand our community a little bit better. And so it's just, it's a business. I mean, that's literally what this has become. It's like it's created a business, and the fails and things that I've done that some people may be surprised when they read it, like, oh, I didn't know that happened. Going back to the whole storytelling, I want to show that. I mean, being transparent. I'm things I oopsed on. I mean, it didn't affect anybody's life directly. It affected my life directly, my family's life directly, because when it comes to financial things. But I made it work, and here we are today.
Yeah, being a business owner is a lot of, oh, that didn't work. Oh, I need to find a new way, or lots of learning. And I think failure is an important part of being a business owner, but it's not really failure. It's more like, oh, that didn't work. I have to try something new, instead of being like, oh, that didn't work. I'm horrible. It's just, that didn't work. I need to try something new, or I need to learn something new, or I need to connect with someone who is better at that, and collaborating. And what I think is great about how Women Veteran Alliance connects women veterans is that we can support each other in things that we're doing and working together. And I went to Podcast Movement in 2019 because they had childcare, because my husband's in the military and he was TDY, and I got invited to speak, but he already had this TDY scheduled. And then the lady who asked me to speak was like, oh, they have childcare. And I was like, oh, well, then I can go. And so that was really, it made it possible for me to go, because I'm a military spouse and I live in Virginia, and I didn't have someone who I could have watch my kids for a week so that I could go. And so it worked out really good that they had that childcare, and then they even got a sponsor, so it was free childcare, which was even better. It really opened up the door for me to be able to go to the conference because they had that available.
Those are things that, we have to see, right? And once we see that, okay, how can we fill that need so she can get there? And that's, and that leads even to why I started Women Veterans Giving, which is the nonprofit partner. And, and one of those things is that gap and that need. One, how can we get more women to come to the unconference that may not be able to financially afford it? Well, let's create scholarships for them. And that's what we've done since, I think, 2018 is we've had scholarships and help women get there, right? And give them the opportunity to be part of that. Because then what happens, a lot of times those women come, they may end up becoming members, or they end up coming back the next year and they're paying for it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's empowerment. That's just like, how can I find ways to empower her to come? So just even by them paying for your childcare, that empowered you to do what you do. And now you've turned around and helped empower others. So if we can continue to find ways that doing things that we're good at, or finding ways that we can do that. And that's one of them. And then with Women Veterans Giving, the other one's the Small Business Award. Me being a small business owner, which I am, and we know you got to have money to do stuff. I mean, it's great, but you got to pay for, I'm sure, this program you have, right? And you have to pay for all these things. And once you're a business owner, you know that there's a cost. And whether you're running a nonprofit or not, I mean, that's still a business. You still got to pay for things. And doing what I've done, and again, I share in the book, I refinanced my house. I took from my 401k, credit cards, because I wanted to continue to do this. That's how much that meant. I mean, I knew eventually it'd all work itself out, but I'm like, let's do this, because if I'm going to keep continuing to do this, there has to be money coming in, because now we are back finally a 2-person income, because that's what we have. And it's like, okay, but what if there's that woman that wants to do all this, but she doesn't have those other things? How can we help her? How can we help her get a loan? Because, after doing research and finding out, a lot of times our women veterans aren't able to get loans, or veterans in general may not even have credit, which I really didn't think about it until, I was reading this one story, because some veterans may not, when they're in the military, they may not have needed credit. So how do you get a Fico score? How do you get right? That kind of thing. So if I can help women infuse a little bit of cash into her, whether it's her idea or her business, let's do it. We've given over $15,000 to date to, women veterans, and helping, and then the program's continuing to evolve itself with that, because I rarely see anything that's specifically for women veterans. I mean, there might be something women, there might be something, veterans, and we should be part of all these, but having that opportunity. And it also, too, it brings awareness that women serve in the military. Everything I do, 2 reasons. One, it's awareness and everything that comes in with that, bringing awareness that women serve to our community, bringing awareness to our community, but also, too, bringing that, there's also that financial piece. So those are like my 2 things that I do, and they each help each other to help women. And that excites me every time. And I think about, the ways we can help her out. And that's why the nonprofit started. And then also, too, helping women veterans get on boards and having experience, being on a board with that. And again, we got to do what we've got to do to make it happen. And in 2020, with COVID, I'm like, well, you were one of the finalists. I'm like, man, are we going to have money to pay, to award this? I had a garage sale that year. I was finding any ways I can find to get money, because they're just, we had to cancel our fundraiser. So there's just all these things. It's like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to fund this program. So yes, so that's, I know I probably kind of went a whole other direction than what we were talking about. It kind of led into that piece there.
And one of the things that I wanted to talk about for the book is that you're now you're in the women veteran community and you're doing great things, but we need to share our stories outside the women veteran community. And you're one of 2 veterans. You said there's 21 women who wrote in the book, and you're one of veterans. And so it's giving you the opportunity to share your story with a whole new audience that can start to find out about what women veterans are doing and what they have done. And so how important is that in your mission forward?
100%. It's taking it. Would I have thought of doing this 3 years ago? Maybe, but it's time, right? It's like, okay, how can I continue to grow, whether it's up or sideways? How can I continue our mission and bringing more the awareness piece? And like you mentioned, I got a good grasp in the women veteran community. Now, how can I get the other, 90-something% of people that never served to know about what we're doing? The best way is get in a book that's not women veteran focused. It's about what I've done, about creating this opportunity. And I feel having this, and you should see, the other women are phenomenal women that are in this book. So they're selling their book to the people that they know. Now more people are going to read like, oh, here is this, this chapter about this women veterans group. But also too, it's also about women veterans, but it's also about being a business owner. It's about being unstoppable. That's what, the book is. It's about creating this opportunity. And, and I had started to write the book prior to being invited to be an author. And I'm like, okay, well, this makes sense. Then I can do this, because I also, when I started Women Veterans Alliance, the thought was to have chapters. So I had created this whole how to start a chapter piece, which I was going to have in the book. So it's not in this book. So I've created in the ebook, which is, so you read the book, the Unstoppable book. And then if you're like, oh, you know what, how can I start something like this in my community? I'm giving you a checklist now of everything you need to do. So it doesn't have to be women veterans. It could be, women who love brown dogs group, or it's a car club. It's a book club. It's, it's a Bible studies, whatever. It's the same kind of thing. So I've created this whole checklist of how to start that, which is, again, the second piece to the book there, as far as what I talk about creating all these things have happened. And that's where I'm at. And so I'm very excited about this book, which of course, we have on Amazon. You can buy it online or buy the copy on our website. And it's it's something, you could really probably read like in a day of all the women. So, it's a good size book, and you're going to learn all these, these stories and these how-tos. And I love the way that they asked me to write it, because they want you to tell your story. Then they want you to give they call the tool. So it's like the how-to. So some of mine is like the how-to, and then I go more into the ebook, more detail. And I like checklists. So even in my first book I wrote, Get Back to Work, there's all these like checklists in there that I wrote as well.
Yeah, it sounds really good. And I read the introduction and I was like, ooh, that's gotta go on my to-read list, because I've been trying to read more books this year. And so, is there anything else from your time in the military or what you're doing today that we didn't cover?
No, a lot of it's just, being my experience in the civilian world, and of course being Marine Corps wife and having, that experience. And too, you understand, it's like, we understand what it likes to be a woman veteran, but we also understand what it's like to be a spouse. We know those two camps, because we lived in those two camps, and what that means. And, and I've been asked before too, having been married, for Marine for so long, because I've been a spouse. I was a spouse longer than I was in the military. It's like, well, why aren't you on the spouse camp? I'm like, I can be, but I understand that camp. But to me, there's been so many more resources for spouses than it has been for the woman veteran. And I feel I can be, and I will continue to be more of an advocate, and I can bring more awareness, and I can use mine to bring, I don't want to say our struggle, but we're just so unrecognized, right? It's just we need to bring her to the forefront. And that's what I feel that I've done. Perfect example, when you go into the exchange and you go into the women's section for the military, it says the wife, right? It's like name your wife. Okay, but where's the other stuff for that, whether it's active duty or it's a veteran? And even it's those little things that can make such a difference. And that's why, creating my store and having all those things on there, and, promoting, women and the authors and the books. We need to be that. And, for me, of course, I also collaborate with other women veteran groups and other ways we can collaborate. But we still have more work to do when it comes to women veterans there, and I'm just going to keep on going.
Yep, that's awesome. I feel the same inner tension, but it was funny when I was starting my podcast, my military spouse friends were like, oh no, you have to focus on women veterans. Who cares about spouses?
Oh, that's good. That's good.
And they were like, I want to know those stories. And I feel they felt the same way. Like, there's already resources out there for spouses, but they didn't know of any for women veterans. And I didn't know of any for women veterans until I started to get involved. And so they were the ones who pushed me in the direction that I'm in. And so whenever people are like, why don't you? I'm like, I talked to the spouses. They told me to go this way. So I always like to end the podcast interview with, what advice would you give to young women who are considering military service?
Talk to another woman that has served. Don't take the word of Uncle Joe, right? Because everybody has that one, like, oh, well, go talk to your Uncle Joe, We're like, no. If you can find another woman, whether she's serving or currently, serving, I feel that's so important. I can just, and, of course, and you having your book, how critical that's going to be for the success. To me, having that resource, it's going to help make her more successful. One of the things that I had started here, but kind of got sidetracked, is having a mentor program to where we can match women up that are getting ready to serve with other women that are already out, because having that person, right? Because we know women join for different reasons. Some are joining to like escape something. Some women have no family, which, that opens your eyes to join the military. Like, you don't have family. So if they had like a mentor, a person, right, that can be that resource, I think that's so important for her success. And of course, buy Amanda's book. That's huge. And congratulations. That's very exciting.
Thank you. And I just launched a mentorship program for that exact thing, because I think it's so important, not only for the young women who are joining the military, but really for us, the women veterans, to be able to give back to the next generation. I found so much joy and passion in helping women as they join the military. And so I'll link to that in the show notes if you want to join. And
yeah, no, I want to promote that, because it's right. It's like, for me, I was fortunate. I had like the mom and the aunt who would send me care packages. And then you have those that they got nothing. But just think, if you had a mentor, she could, just those little things, right? She could be that person that's going to send you that card or send you whatever you want. I'm not saying that you're looking at looking for the relationship because of those things, but that's part of it, right? You have that person you can call, you can FaceTime with, or if it's good or bad, you have someone you can share that with, that can also help you. And you can, it's forming friendships, and that's a woman thing, right? It's just that networking, that connectivity piece that we do. And that's been such a missing link when it comes to our military women.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I'm so excited that I got to hear about your story and just get to have this conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thanks so much for watching this week's video. If you like this video, please like it. And if you want to hear more stories of military women, please subscribe to Women of the Military. And you can check out more military stories on Women of the Military podcast. If you have any ideas or topics for future videos that you would like me to cover, please put them in the comments and I will get back to you and try and make those videos happen. Thanks so much for watching and for supporting Women of the Military.